Hello everyone, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, and I just kind of wanted to take an opportunity to share a little project with you all. Not that I have a ton of people who look at my site, but just sharing. I recently, and I say recently, it was actually last year, but well, relatively recently in this grand scheme of things, I suppose, I have decided to undertake translating the New Testament, just mostly as kind of for my own benefit, getting to go through and see how things transfer over, what kind of the underlying ideas behind the word, so to speak, is just, good Bible familiarity thing. I don't want anyone to think that I believe that, there's we don't have enough Bible translations in English or something like that. We have more than enough. But there is one area that is interesting to me, and on that basis I would like to, if I ever finish, and I don't know if I will, but if I ever finish, I would like to make some things available to people that usually aren't. Two areas in particular. And those are textual criticism. That is, even with a lot of Bible versions that are out today, they usually don't put a whole lot of textual information out there, and even in a lot of the modern translations that do keep track of the changes and do keep track of some of the differences, they usually don't go through a whole lot of them. And I would like to make a translation that does, just in the interest of being honest, give a kind of a measure of confidence, if you will, for the ones that are in the main text, if you will. But also admit that there are some differences, and showcase what those differences are. And of course, the vast majority of the time, they're not very consequential at all. But nonetheless, it's one of those things that, just as far as kind of academic honesty and integrity, you'd want to have. Now, whether or not that's here nor there, whether or not it's significant, isn't really the matter. It's just mostly something that I wanted to do, and I feel fairly strongly about that idea of academic and historical culpability. The other issue, aside from looking at the manuscript evidence and noting variants and that kind of thing, is the whole idea that I talk about fairly often of high church versus low church. And recently, in a conversation that I had with someone online, they pointed out, not very kindly, but they pointed out, and frankly it's good that they pointed it out, that for most people, when you talk about high church and low church, they usually think of Church of England. And that's appropriate, because that's where that term is most often used. That's not quite what I mean when I refer to it, but it is a little bit misleading to use that terminology. So for this translation, I'm kind of referring it to as kind of a biblical historical principle instead of high church, low church, just because that seems to be confusing for some people, using the high church, low church mentality. So what I mean in presenting things biblically, historically, is representing the Bible in terms of an appropriate historical context. And one of the things that means is that things should be fully translated, in my personal opinion. That is, there's a lot of Bible words, especially in the New Testament, that are not completely translated. Instead, they're what we call transliterated. They're basically put into a form that English-speaking people can say. One example of this is the word apostle. The word apostle comes from the Greek word apostolos, and it doesn't necessarily mean someone in the church. The church, of course, uses it. Don't get me wrong on that. And church people do use it, Christians do use it. But the word itself, as it was used in its original context, didn't mean that. The Greek word for apostle existed before the time of Christ. It wasn't suddenly new to that kind of a situation. It was a word that already existed in the language and already had a meaning. And the question for translators becomes, do you translate it according to that meaning, or do you translate it in such a way that allows it to take on kind of the flavor that it's taken on through the ages? Well, apostle has kind of taken on a certain flavor through the ages, and people think of it typically in a singularly Christian way. and I'm glad that they think of it in a Christian way. I am. But at the same time, if we want to understand the biblical text, we have to understand that at the time, they didn't have quite the same view of it that we do necessarily. And so the question becomes, how do you translate it accurately based on the context that it actually occurs? And that's one thing that I'd like to do in this translation, is try to render terms in contextually appropriate ways. Not an easy task. There's a lot of reason why transliterations have been very popular in English. Frankly, it solves a lot of hassle for people if you just transliterate. And the main problem with that is that a given word doesn't always have the same meaning in every context. A classic example is the Apostle Paul. We call him an apostle, and the biblical text does use the Greek word apostolos, but there is kind of always that question as to whether or not Paul is an apostle in the same sense that the 12 are. And that one's not as easily answered. And so the question becomes, when you get to Paul being called an apostle, is that the same as the 12 being called an apostle? And what distinction, if any, should be made in the translation? That's kind of an interesting question. And honestly, I haven't completely figured that out. I've just began my translation. I'm only into chapter 3 of Matthew. I'm literally right at the beginning. And I'm not even done with that. And like I said, this is something I started back last year. But anyways, if any of you all would like to support me in this, I would appreciate it. Moral and prayer support, if nothing else. I'm planning on calling it, like I said, I don't know if I'll ever finish, but I'm planning on calling it the Biblical Historical Version. And main features will be that it will include textual critical information. That is where a variant reading occurs in the text. If it's a major variant reading, I'm not going to go through every spelling difference and those kinds of things. Just main readings, like think, for those of you who know textual criticism, think like UBS 5 type variants. Just those that are necessary for establishing the text and are essential to translation. Other ones not so worried about. Just the ones that affect translation and help you establish what the text is. Those are basically the only ones that I really plan on including. And those kinds of things. And as far as main text for it is concerned, I probably will be relying extensively on the UBS 5 and Nestle Ellen 28th editions. They're good texts, and they have a lot of the critical information right there. Now, the Bible Society that prints them, of course, they copyright and their critical apparatus, and so I can't do a direct copy paste over. And besides, it wouldn't be very useful if I did a direct copy paste over, just because their apparatus is in Greek, and that's not really going to help the English speaking person very well. And so I'm thinking about putting forward all the critical apparatus in English. Some changes around from some of those systems. I probably won't rely much on the Nestle Ellen 28th system. It's a little cumbersome. There's lots and lots of stuff that's included in it, and most of it doesn't really have much of a bearing. So I won't worry myself with that one as much, but including that textual information so that people can see what the options are, as well as alternate translations. Same thing, but you can translate it more than one way. Those are important to have as well, so I'll try to make sure that I include those as much as possible within reasonable limits. And then the other side of it is avoiding what I call high church language. It's more accurately institutional Christianity, the language that institutional Christianity uses, such as using words like apostle and prophets and even angel. That is, there are more accurate definitions of what they are. Angel doesn't mean angel. For example, it technically actually means messenger. And it's based on context as to whether or not this is a heavenly messenger or not. And so rendering things contextually like that and making sure that you're as accurate with the text as you can be would be something that I would very much so value. So like I said, if any of you just feel randomly inclined to support me in that way and give me a thumbs up or something, or just let me know that, yeah, we appreciate this or something like that, it really would mean something to me. Honestly, it would. And as I get more and more material, hopefully I'll be able to post it online and provide you guys with some examples of what I'm talking about. Hopefully along with this video I can provide an example of what I have so far, and give you guys a chance to kind of see what I'm talking about. And maybe people will look at it and say, I absolutely hate it, it's cumbersome, I can't read it, I don't know what's going on. In which case, it's just me being randomly weird. But if people are able to look at it and say, yeah, I could see where this would be valuable and how this is useful and this kind of thing, if that's what happens, well then maybe I actually really can make something that will be more useful to more people than just me. And I really wouldn't know that one way or the other unless I get a little bit of feedback on it. So if you're interested in providing a little bit of feedback, this is one of the few videos that I will actually leave open comments on. Most of the time I limit it. But if you would like to provide some feedback, I'll leave the comments open, and we'll just see what comes out of this. Like I said, please don't respond if you don't like Bibles that have footnotes in them. And if you're someone who's, Texas Receptus only, King James only, or something like that, yeah, this really isn't for you. Okay, so don't respond in that case, because honestly, it's not for you. But for those of you who are interested in having a Bible that would list the variants, and also that would strive as best as possible to avoid Christianese, if you will, but rather present things as they would be in that original context as much as possible. I'm not claiming to be perfect at it by any means, but at least try to. If you guys are interested in that, take a look at the work that I've done so far, which isn't much, but take a look at it and leave some comments to that effect. Please, nothing mean or nasty. Keep it civil, polite, all that good stuff. But if we can make something that is truly useful in an academic sense, that would be wonderful. It really would. Thank you for your time and effort. Go with God and be blessed.